Well, Shakti, I mean, we hope that by March it would be like 2019, but I think people would still say that take precautions like wearing a mask and such things. But yeah, by then, many things may return to normal. Already, schools have opened, many cities, many states, schools have opened. So, in fact, right now for 2 weeks, I have come to my hometown, which is Indore in Madhya Pradesh. And so this was the first travel I have undertaken after a gap of 20 months, which is most unusual. I used to travel 3 or 4 times a month for some meeting or the other, some work or the other. And 40 months no travel, very unusual for me. But flights were full. Not everybody was following all the protocols, but generally people were. So let's hope we can sometime during the next semester, either at the beginning or in the middle, things improve a lot and get back to our usual life with restrictions, as I mentioned. Okay, so let us resume. So briefly, last time when we talked, last session, when was it? Friday, I guess. We're talking about the power series representing functions. And then, let me share this screen. Yeah, so we had we introduced the exponential and observed that f dash x is fx if f is the exponential function. And we had defined it only as summation of x power n by factorial n. And then using the result about product of two power series is given by another power series, and the coefficients for the resulting power series are, if an and bn are two power series, both converging in the same minus m to m, then their product is also power series and the coefficients are given by the summation ak bn minus k equal to 0 to n. We saw that last time. We have done it earlier. We just recalled it. And using that, we can get that exponential function that we defined as through power series has this property that exponential of alpha x exponential beta x is equal to exponential of alpha plus beta x. And then defining exp x at x equal to 1 as e, then we can do various tricks and actually then eventually come that expx is nothing but e power x. This part we did last time. I just mentioned that if we define, just give me a minute. About 12 o'clock, I will send you a message or call you. I'm teaching right now about 12 o'clock. Okay. Yeah. So, if we define Sx as x minus x cubed by 3 factorial plus x5 by 5 factorial. So, these are all odd powers of x divided by the factorial of the power that we have taken and alternating as minus n plus. So if it is 4n plus 1 kind number, then it is plus, and 4n plus 3, it is minus. And Sx as 1 minus, similar thing, alternating but this time with even. X square by x2 factorial, etc., etc. So somewhere you may have seen that these are the expansions of the sine and cosine functions. And here we are not going to do the entire connection between the algebraic, the geometric way of defining sine and cosine and these functions. But what we are going to do today is, and that's why deliberately I have not written SIN and COS. Okay. But this is essentially sine and this is essentially cosine. But whatever properties we know about sine and cosine, some of them we will deduce for these functions, at least several of them. Okay. And last time I said, okay, name some properties that you would like to, that you recall offhand. And one immediate answer as expected is sine square x plus cos square x equal to 1. Looking at these expressions, it's not clear at all how the hell is one going to prove that. Maybe possible to write out a proof, because so S square itself will also be a function like this, because it's Sx times Sx. And using this rule that we worked out here, maybe some of you can work out the coefficients, and purely using this method, that product of two power series, then the product is also a power series, and the coefficients obtained this technique. Using that, some of you may even conclude that s square x plus sine square x, or s square x plus s square sec square x is also equal to 1. So only this one survives, everything else there's a cross happens. But there are multiple ways of doing it. We are going to do it some other way. So having said that, let me now go back to my iPad. Yeah. So now I am here formally defining these functions Sx and Cx. I define it for every x, and well, we had noted it earlier, so I have not even written down that both these are well defined. For all x, these series converge absolutely. Okay, the root test. So maybe, yeah, root test. Ratio test will not work because they are alternatingly 0 and then something, 0 and something. And ratio test, the way we have written, it won't work, but root test will work. Nth root, absolute value, etc. So for every x, these are absolutely convergent series, so well defined. Now, let's start by making some observations. It's trivial to note that for all x, s of minus x is minus sx and c of minus x is cx. Well, why? Because if we substitute here s of x by s of minus x, what happens? Everything else remains the same. You have x power 2n plus 1 becomes minus x to the power 2n plus 1. Since the powers are all odd, multiplying the x by minus 1 will give you the whole thing will get multiplied by minus. Whereas in cosine case, everything is x power 2n. So x and minus x are the same as far as even powers are concerned. So Both these are absolutely immediate. Okay. Now, S0 is 0 and C0 is 1. Why? When here every term is x in it, there is no constant term. So Sx is 0. And Cx at n equal to 0, you have x power 2n, which is x power 0, which is 1. And but for that, everything else has a positive power of x, which is given as 0. So everything else smashes, only the term, leading term remains. And that is, sorry. So multiplying by -1, everything remains the same. So C of minus x is Cx. That we observed. And yeah, sorry, we are talking about this. So if you substitute 0 for S, each term vanishes. If you substitute 0 for C, only the n equal to 0 terms survive. Everything else is the x, and that gets knocked out. So C0 equal to 0, C0 equal to 1, S0 equal to 0, C0 equal to 1. These are easy to note. Okay. How about something more substantive? Okay. So first line, I have just rewritten the expressions for S and C so that we can compare what we are doing. Now, both the series are absolutely convergent for mod x less than equal to m for every m. And we had seen that when you have absolute convergent series in the open interval, you can differentiate them by term. This was one of the things which we had done last time. So this is how I would like you to write somehow, that because of absolute convergence on whatever region, we can differentiate term by term. And then just do that. So S dash x will be, this term by term thing is 1 by 2 factorial 2n plus 1 remains as it is. X power 2n plus 1 will become 2n plus 1 times n plus 1 times x power 2n. So the net effect is that there is just 2n plus 1. And now let us note what happens. Here we have x power 2n. In denominator, you have 2n plus 1 factorial, but you got a 2n plus 1 multiplier. These two together will crash out and we'll get 2n factorial. And that will give you the term in the Cx, this definition of C. So this one leads that so the main thing is that because of absolute convergence, we can differentiate term by term. And once you differentiate term by term, it is clear that here itself it is clear that there will be 2 power n plus 1 multiplier will come, that will reduce the denominator factorial to 2n factorial, and this will become x power 2n. So we'll go here. Let's about what about C dash x? Well, maybe I should have written this is n equal to n1 onwards. Zero x power minus 1, all kinds of messes there. So here the term n equal to 0, there is x power 0. So there is only a constant term, and when we differentiate, that will go away. At n equal to 0, we have x power 0, 1 by 2 factor 0 factorial, x power 0, minus 1 to the power 0. So it is just 1 plus summation n equal to 1 to infinity, this expression. So the constant 1 vanishes, and when you differentiate the other ones, this is what we get. And now we can see that here we have written x power 2n minus 1, and the denominator is 2n factor. 2n will cancel. So here it will be 2n minus 1 factorial. And that is same as y minus, okay. Here x power 2n minus 1 gets multiplied by minus 1 to the power n. Whereas here x power 2n plus 1 was getting multiplied by minus 1 to the power n. So there is a gap of 1 index. Plus here, if this is plus, it is minus here. If this is minus, this is plus here. So the whole thing gets multiplied by minus Sx. See, if we, instead of writing it in this format, if we write it as a so when we differentiate derivative of this is 0. What is the derivative of x square by 2 factorial? With a minus sign. This will be minus x. x4 by 4 factorial, when we differentiate, it will become 4 times x cube. 4 will get cancelled. So x cube by 3 factorial and so on. So whereas for s, it is, if we carefully track from here at n equal to 0, it is just 1. No. X power 2n plus 1. So it is x times, and denominator is 2n plus 1 factorial. It's just 1 factorial, which is just 1. This is 0. So it starts with x, then minus. So we can see that c dash x is equal to minus of sx. So from properties of power series, and that once you have absolute convergence, then you can have actually in the interior of that, we can do term by term derivation. Okay. So we have proven one property at the moment, that s dash x is cx, c dash x is minus s. Now, for sine cosine, I'm sure you have done this. Sine of x plus y is equal to sine x cosine y plus cosine x sine y. So let's try to prove that. Okay. So one of the reasons I picked it is that instead of just doing more and more theorems and statements, actually do some calculations for some specific examples. Okay. So you have Sx and Cx, both are absolutely convergent with appropriate AK and An and Bn identified. And therefore, if we take Cnxy as Akx Bnky summation n equal to 0 to n, we'll get that Sxcy is summation n equal to 0 to infinity Cnx comma y. Because we are taking Sx along with Cy. If we put Cy, we have to substitute y in this and then put it here together. And this is what it will be. And was redundant. This is one power series. Here is another power series. The product will be a power series Cnxy will be just directly given by this formula. I don't know why intermediate step I written. That is somewhere not correct. So first one up to 2k plus 1 and second one 2 of n minus k, and that's it. Yeah, here is the statement. And we have two such things. Here itself is the statement. Cnxy summation k equal to 0 to n akx bn minus ky. So what is ak? Ak is the kth thing here. It is minus 1 to the power k. Maybe what I had written is correct, except that I missed the this should have been like here, summation n equal to 0 to k equal to 0 to n. Then this is correct. So here is the expression coming from, this is the ak, in this expression akx minus 1 power k 1 by 2 k plus 1 factorial x power 2k minus 1. This is ak and this is bn minus k. Okay. This is ak, this is bn minus k. So now, firstly, minus 1 power k times minus 1 power n minus k. When you multiply the two, what will you get? Just minus 1 to the power n. So 1 by 2k plus 1 factorial and 1 by 2 n minus k factorial, I have stated them as they are. And then x power 2k plus 1 y power 2 n minus k. So this is now correct. We have verified. Now,
shouldn't the summation be from k is equal to 0 to n instead of n going from 0 to infinity?
yeah, I changed that, no? Oh, denominator here. No. This you are talking about this next page or this page. Okay.
No, so you circled that thing in black.
Yeah, so that is k equal to 0 to n.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I agree.
So for Sxcy, we have to take summation over Cnxy. Okay. This we have already seen. So therefore, we have that Sxcy plus Sycx. You have to interchange the play of y and x. So that will be summation over Cnxy plus Cnyx. Remember, we are trying to prove that so that is why I want to look at what does Sxcy appear to be, and from symmetry we can then similarly write down Cxsy. What is the right hand side here looks like, and that is what we have done. We first computed Sxcy, and then Sxy, Sycx will be just interchange role of y and x, and we will get that this product, this sum is equal to the infinite sum of Cn xy plus Cn yx. Now, yeah, I'll take it up so that I can get at least the expression about Cn xy. Cn xy is n k equal to 0 to n, 1 over 2k plus 1, 2n minus k, x power 2k plus 1, y power 2n minus k. So for a reason which I'll come in a minute, I'm writing in the first one, the summation for Cn, I'm taking the summation. Instead of k, I've used it I, and for Cn yx, I'm going to use j instead of k again. So I equal to 0 to n, 1 over 2i plus 1 factorial, 1 over 2n minus I factorial, x power 2k plus 1, y power 2n minus k. So at this point, I've just written out the two expressions. Changed k to I here and changed k to j here. Okay. Now, look at the sum. The first two terms I'm combining and writing it as minus 1 power n is common in both, so that is come out. Now here there were n plus 1 terms, here also n plus 1 terms, but here x is getting multiplied by even number, odd number, and y by an even number, and here y by an odd number and x by an even number. So I'm right. I want to write it as the sum of here 2i plus 1 and 2n minus I. So if we take the sum of the powers of x and y, it is equal to 2i gets cancelled and 2n plus 1. Likewise here, for product, sum of the powers of x and y together, you get 2n plus 1. Change n to n here. N here. So the point is, all of them are giving you terms between k equal to 0 to 2 power n plus 1. The x even and y odd is in the second term, and x odd y even is in the first term. And whatever is the power of x, you have factorial of that and factorial of power of y, both common. So you can combine the two and see that it is exactly equal to this, what I have written. 1 by k factorial, 1 over 2n plus 1 minus k, x power k. So when k is odd, it is exactly this term. If k is 3, then it will correspond to I equal to 1. So 2 plus 1. And then you match that it will be exactly that one. Whereas if k is even, let's say k equal to 4, it will correspond to j equal to n minus 4. So n minus j will be 4. Because we want to get x power 4. X power 4 will come out when n minus j is equal to 2. So if both here I and j, instead of that they were k and k, then we'll have all kinds of trouble when how will we add those. Okay. So that is why I've changed the indices I in one and j in the other. And we note that the k equal to odd terms will come from the first term and k equal to even terms will come from the second term. But together it is exactly this. And anyway, this semester everything is open book exam only because you are sitting at home. But let's say if you are in a CMI lecture hall and I'm teaching this, I write these things and people are just looking at that, because at that time all the students especially would be worried about that what if this is asked in the exam, do we have to mug it up, this expression. This year everything is open book, so you don't have to, you are not worried about that. But if it is a teaching in class, then the exams can be closed book, open book, all kinds of things, right? So, but don't worry, if I teach this in a standard class also, if something is just too tedious and it is basically memory, I mean, I have not, I had to work out exactly how we will do this, right? So, at least for me, the philosophy for exams is that I don't ask anything which is just too complicated, too tedious for the expressions and such things. If I give something like this, I will, like in the mid-sem, I had given 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You go back and look at the mid-sem paper. If in any of that I had missed out the first 2 or 3 and just put the last one or last but one, it may be difficult to do, much more difficult to do than if it is given in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So usually I am not for putting things in a, asking students to mug up anything. Anyway, so now coming back, when I did CNXY, I used the index I. When I did CNYX, I used the index J, because when I am adding them up, I am putting, if the first one I go from the I equal to 0 to n, the second one J, I go from n to 0. And then in the next, you will get all the odd terms in the first and in the second, and the even terms in the first term. This n I am now rewritten as m, or what? No, but that should have been n throughout. Here m. So CMXY minus CM plus CMYX will be given by this expression. Yeah. So here we had 1 over k factorial, 1 over 2m plus 1 minus k factorial. If only in the numerator we had 2m plus 1 factorial, we would get that this is 2m plus 1 choose k. Right? If you compare this, if only I give you in the numerator 2m plus 1 factorial, then what I have encircled in red will become 2m plus 1 choose k. Well, you put this as 2m plus 1 choose k and divide by whatever you may have put in the numerator. So we get this.
Sir, minus 1 raised to m.
Sorry?
Minus 1 raised to m.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks. So now this 1 over 2m plus 1 factorial is common term. So it can come out of the summation over k. It comes out. Once you bring it out, the remaining is just x plus y to the power 2m plus 1, binomial theorem. And therefore, we get that you have x plus y to power m plus 1 by 1 over 2m plus 1. And thus we get that Sxcy plus Sycx is equal to this in sum, which is S of x plus y. Once again, confusion with n and n. I don't know where I started this confusion. Yeah. So I'm sure in somewhere in school or somewhere where you have done geometry and sine and cosine, you would have done a proof of this, that sine of x plus y, but in the geometry you would have drawn some graph and then added something and done some funny things. But I have done that, but right now I can't do it if I have to ask, if I have to produce the proof using this standard geometry. I'll take half an hour to remember the proof or work out the proof, but doesn't matter. So we have proved Sxcy plus Sycx is Sx plus y, right? So let's take stock. What did we do? We first started off by observing very simple things. This was the simplest observations about S and C, these functions. And then we proved derivatives. Derivative of S is C and derivative of C is S, is minus S. Then we came to the proof of this Sx plus y is equal to this. And that is what we ended just now. Now, I said that proceeding similarly, we can show that Cx Cy minus Sx Sy is Cx plus y. So some property that you know for cosine function, cosine of x plus y is this cosine x cosine y minus sin x sin y. We can do this similarly. You have to just, but this time earlier I just could from Sx Cy, I could get to Sy Cx, but just by saying similarly. Here now we'll need to do twice the work that we did just now because we'll have to do Cx Cy and Sx Sy. However, I have now an alternate proof. Alternatively, we have done this already, Sx Cy, etc. using S dash x is equal to Cx and C dash x equal to minus Sy minus Sx. C dash x is minus Sx. So we have a function. Here, if we treat y as constant and x as the variable, and differentiate with respect to x, what happens? Sx plus y, the derivative will be s dash x plus y. Here, the derivative will be s dash x, Cy will stay as it is. This is where I made a mistake. This should be, we are differentiating with respect to x and not y. So this should have been Sy C dash x. Okay. Hopefully the next line is correct now. So Now S dash xy is cxy, S dash of x plus y is c of x plus y. So this is c of x plus y. Here S dash x is cx, cy. So cx, cy. And sy is sy and c dash x is minus sx, so that will give you minus sx.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So here we are differentiating with respect to x.
Yeah.
So sir, h dash y shouldn't it be 0?
Wait. What should not be 0?
So s dash y should, s of y should be a constant then.
Yeah, so therefore I have put this black color. This I am.
Okay, so okay.
Instead of it is sy c dash x. So this is while I cut and paste and then change something. So I changed the wrong object. That's all. I put cx sy and I should have changed the prime one from s to c, which I forgot to do. So that's why now I've written down sy c dash x. Okay. And now we decode that sy c dash x is equal to sy as it is and c dash x is equal to minus sx. So we get, so we need not proceed similarly to get this expression about cx plus y is equal to, or namely cosine of x plus y is equal to cos x cos y minus sin x sin y. Something that you are used to doing, used to using. I've done that now using derivative one. So this is the other thing in math, that you can have multiple ways of proving the same thing, and anyone should work. And as a student or as somebody who's trying to study that, it's good to see as many different proofs as you can. Something if it looks too complicated, you give it up is one thing, but seeing multiple ways of dealing with it is very useful, because when you don't never know that when next time you want to do it in something similar, one of them may work, one of them may not work. Okay. So now let's see what all we have done. So S and C I have written down once again. And for every x, we have S of minus x is minus of Sx, C of minus x is Cx, S dash x is equal to Cy, C dash x is equal to minus Sx, S0 is 0, S0 is 1. And further, we have seen that if you have two variables x and y in R, we have Sx plus y and Cx plus y, these expressions. I have still not done S square plus C square equal to 1. We'll get to that now. So for that, let us recall something which we have done when we discussed differentiation, but that was before mid-sem, and then quickly we took it out of the syllabus for mid-sem, so you may have even forgotten it. So I've carefully rewritten it here. That if E and F are open intervals, F is a function from E to F, G is a function from F to R. And so the important thing is that if G is from F to R, then this little f should also only go up to F, not entire R. Okay. So the domain of G should be the range of E, range of F. Range of F should be contained in the domain of G. So F is differentiable at a point A and G is differentiable at the point B equal to Fa. And we compose the two by this formula. G composed with F means Hx equal to Can't help much when this noise going on in the new outside.
It's okay, sir.
You
It's okay.
All right. Yeah. So hx is g of fx, which is defined this way. Then we had seen that if f is differentiable at a and g is differentiable at f of a, then h itself is differentiable at a, and h dash a is equal to g dash fa times f dash a. So again, you would have done this a lot of times in your school curriculum. In this formal way of doing things, we had done the proof last 2 weeks ago. It's an extremely useful tool. Okay. So, as a consequence, taking gx is equal to x power k, for hx is equal to fx power k, we'll see that h dash x will be, to differentiate this, so k times fx to the power k minus 1 and then f dash x. Okay. And so let's take ux to be s square x and vx to be c square x. And take wx to be the sum of the two. Now, what is u dash x? U dash x will be, we have to look at this one. So s square x, differentiation of this square will give you 2 times sx times derivative of s. So 2 times sx times derivative of s, which is c. Just blindly applying this formula, we get u dash x is equal to 2sx cx. Likewise, c dash is x is minus sx. So it will be v dash will be 2 times cx times minus sx. Earlier, I had not written out this part about square separately, directly applying k equal to 2. But now, since I have put in the thing, I don't need to say k equal to 2 here. As a consequence, we see that for x in R, w dash x, which was u dash x plus v dash x. Now let's write down what is u dash, what is v dash. 2 sx cx plus 2 cx minus sx. Basically, twice c times s times c, and here minus twice s times c. Is 0. So what did we get? We have w dash x is 0. For every x, the derivative is 0 and w0 is 1. w0 will correspond to s0 plus c0. s0 is 0, c0 is 1, so w0 is 1. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to argue that since derivative is 0 and w0 is 1, w will be 1 for every x. That is our aim. That Okay, this is our aim. If we in school you would have done it and used it left and right. But now we want to write a proof. From where does it come? That if the derivative is 0, then the function must be a constant. How do we write a proof of that? Well, recall mean value theorem. If A and B are in R, A less than B, and G is from A to B, is a continuous function, such that G is differentiable in the open interval, then there exists a C in the open interval AB such that GB minus GA by B minus A is G dash C. So the left is the mean value of the function G, and it is attained at some point in between. So for X positive, the mean value theorem yields that there exists a Cx in the open interval 0 to X such that Wx minus W0 by X, which is equal to W dash Cx, C sub X is this one, is 0. And hence, if this can be 0 means the numerator is 0. Hence Wx is equal to W0 equal to 1 for all X positive. So when we did mean value theorem, it appeared that, why is it important? We don't even know what is that C. Why should we care whether GB minus GA by B minus A is G times C or not? Does there exist such a C or not? Well, now we get a concrete thing that, so what we have done is we have given a proof for we have given a proof for this. W0 equal to 1 plus W dash X equal to 0 for all X says that Wx is 1 for all X. If derivative is 0 for all X, then the function is constant. So if you are given one value at one point, that's it. So we have proved that using mean value theorem. But this is only for X positive. For X negative, the argument is very similar. The mean value theorem will tell you, you take X as A and 0 as B. So there is this Cx in this interval such that, well, the expression is the same. Thus we have that S square X plus C square X equal to 1. So extremely important property of sine and cosine function, though I'm not calling them sine and cosine, but they really are. We have gone over various properties and that we know about sine and cosine and used a lot. Those we are deducing, and all the starting point is just the definition of S and C via a power series. Okay, so this appeared like a longish proof, but this I like this proof because we are using different things. We use the mean value, we use the mean value theorem here. Okay, but there is an alternate proof which I will also do. Alternate and shorter. Okay, using that Cx plus y, Cx, Cy minus Sx, Sy, and S of minus x is equal to minus Sx, C of minus x is equal to Cx. We see by taking y equal to minus x in this expression, we had proven this earlier. Take y equal to minus x, what happens in this one? If we take y equal to minus x, the left hand side is C of 0. No argument about that. What does this become? Well, C is, we know is C of minus x is same as C of y. C of y is same as C of minus x, which will be same as Cx. So this changing the sign here doesn't matter. The value will be the same. So we get this is Cx times Cx, which will be C square. Here what happens? When inside the sign we change the we change the plus minus status. If it is minus, it will become plus. If it is plus, it will become minus. because this one one minus sign will come out of here. So that also becomes Sx plus Sy. There is no y, y is x. So C0 is equal to Cx plus Cx plus Sx. Now using C0 is 1, we get 1 is equal to C square x plus C square y. So we used one thing which had been proven earlier, this what looks like complicated maybe was all condensed in this. And then we just used whatever we have observed. But as I mentioned, it's good to catch proofs given by different ways. Okay. And if I started with shorter, then your mind will be off that, okay, why look at a longer proof? So only a little bit longer, it's not hugely longer, but nonetheless longer. Thus, we know, we have now shown that S square plus C square is 1. As a consequence, mod Sx and mod Cx will be less than or equal to 1. Because if mod Sx is strictly bigger than 1, S square will be bigger than 1 strictly. And this will be violated likewise here. So, once again, I've written down the power series of Sx and Cy, and I've written down whatever we have proven. Okay. And if you think about it, directly using this infinite series and trying to do some computations could be a little more tedious than what we have used, some of our tricks we have used, like in S square x to C square x. Okay. So, any questions? Okay. So there are still a few more things which can be done. Perhaps we will do it at a later time. The main purpose today was not to say that, we can do sine and cosine this way, but introduce how we can utilize some of the things which we have proven. Okay. So this is an alternating series and x power 2n plus 1 and so on. And it may be very difficult to show that this is between 0 and 1 or that some of the other properties. Okay. So, this sine, so cosine is actually, once you know sine, the trigonometric functions, if you have one way of, if you have a way of understanding or call, just give me a minute. Inshallah, good. Acha. Okay. 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 Have a good trip. Okay. So, yeah. So I'm sure you all know that once you have good way of handling one trigonometric function, all others can come from there. Like, okay, from sine you can get cosine, then from the two of them together, tangent, and then the rest. Okay. So, how many of you know about the origin of the sine function. Sine is the one which came first, as far as I know. Anyone has any idea as to where did this one originate?
Sir, I think it came from India.
Okay.
Yeah, but
You read about it somewhere or about the India origin?
yes, sir, I've heard of it, but I'm not sure where.
Okay. All right. So, you know, if you try saying this to a few friends, perhaps if they're not mathematicians, they won't care about it. But even if they care, even if they don't care, they're going to challenge you saying, oh, yeah, we know all these claims about India that, you know, we had done everything in the past and so on and so forth. So lots of those claims either are meaningless or, but this is one thing which is, which has been now vetted and more or less certified by international community. And it's good to know where it comes from. Okay, so I had first heard it from a visitor at CMI, a lady from Brown who had a PhD in mathematics from Brown University. And my memory thing, I'm not able to recall her name right now. I'll recall sometime, but she used to visit CMI regularly and we used to talk to her at tea time and otherwise. And I came to know that her very interesting history. She was a mathematics major student, was doing coursework in Brown, and in US, they cannot take a few courses, the other than core courses, they can take any other courses. So she found a course in Sanskrit at Brown University, US. And she went and did a course in Sanskrit. And in that, she heard that lots of things about Indian mathematics and how they had written it in Sanskrit. That was one of the things she heard. She started reading into that, and eventually she's now become an expert on mathematics history. And she gave a talk, and that's where she told. But today, I found that there is a Wikipedia page which essentially tells me whatever she had said in my lecture. So I'm going to pull that up and then share screen. So this is the sign page from Wikipedia. Okay. And so the first part is the interesting part. That general definition is something, sin x opposite by hypotenuse, etc. Motivation of invention was Indian astronomy. And date of solution is Gupta period in India, of the Gupta kingdom, and field of application, etc. We know it's lot more. Okay, so this itself is the interesting one. And by the way, how many of you know the distinction between astronomy and astrology?
Astronomy is a science. Astrology is pseudoscience.
Okay, but that's a. But what do they correspond to? What you say, I also agree. So
astronomy is the observation and the prediction, like, of various phenomena. Sorry, the alarm was ringing. Is the observation and prediction of various phenomena, right? With the aid of some mathematical tools to like just predict things. But astrology is actually attributing causality to like two pretty like vastly different things. So,
right. So, but many people forget this distinction and they say, yeah, astronomy, it's all useless. So it's extremely useful. Astrology is questionable. Astronomy is not questionable at all. Okay. So now let me ask you another question. Here it says motivation for invention Indian astronomy, and the date of solution is period Gupta period, which at least is 1500 years ago, maybe more. So the question could be that why was astronomy important in that period, 1500 years ago?
For astrology, ironically
No,
enough.
no. That's wrong.
For eclipse predictions and
Yes,
all of that.
But why eclipse prediction? So all that was about the agriculture. Okay. When will it rain, and what are the temperature cycle? What is the rain cycle? Which periods it may rain more? Which times it may rain less? All that was very important for agriculture. Okay. And so various civilizations tried to find a handling of these, and those who could do it were very successful, because then they can manage agriculture much better, because now they understand what is astronomy. So it was this primary motivation which led to people interested in how the planetary movements and so on and so forth, and that is what they were observing and so on. When they tried to mathematically write it, that is where sine, cosine, etc. appeared. Okay, at least this is what I, based on my readings, makes okay. And so this, I don't know how much of what you can see. Let's see. Yeah. So this the functions. So this is the line which I will read, but okay. So the function sign can be traced to the function ja, jya, it is in Sanskrit pronounced as ja, or koti ja functions used in Gupta period Indian astronomy, and it names the astronomers at that time or mathematicians at that time, Aryabhatiya and Surya Siddhanta, via translation. And then from first it got from Sanskrit, it got translated to Arabic in the Arab world. That's where it went. And then from Arabic to Latin, the translation of the name. This is talking about the name sign here. Okay. So you may have read that lots of Indian understandings went to the West via the Arab world. And so the word sign in Latin, it means sinus, comes from a Latin mistransliteration of the Arabic jiva, something. So the Arabic jiva was supposedly taken from Indian jia, and from there, but they misunderstood it, and then they called it sinus, and from there sign. So it's interesting. Most important part, the references both here and here are not written by Indian mathematicians or Indian historians. These are both from international authors and published by some reputed journals, etc., journals or bookstores, etc. And now I remembered the name of the mathematician from whom I heard this. Kim Plofker is her name, and from Brown, and she's an expert on mathematics history in general, and for focuses of Indian mathematics history. And tell you how prominent, how well she is regarded across is to tell you that you would have heard of this once in 4 year event called International Congress of Mathematicians, called ICM. It's a mega conference which is held once in 4 years, and this is where the Fields medals are announced. Okay, and getting an invitation to speak in this is a big recognition for a mathematician. And Kim Plofker has been invited as a invited speaker at ICM. So that says how seriously she's taken. Okay. And I'd heard this and a lot more from her when she visited CMI. She used to visit CMI regularly, but not of late. So in any case, it's a good thing to read this Wikipedia page on sign, because it has many interesting things. And what I want you to so from there, I'd gone to a page which was Aryabhat's sign table. So it's not table in the way we understand it today, but he had written out a formula, statement about computing sign of various angles. Okay, and he had given some Devanagari script notation, Makhi, Bhakhi, etc., etc. But what they mean was also described in his writing. So value in Hindu-Arabic numerals is this 225. And Aryabhata's value of Ja of A was this 2.25 dash. That is how he wrote. And modern value, so this is sine of this angle. So what Aryabhata wrote as 225 is now exactly the modern value is 224.8560. So this table is something which was really mind-boggling for me. That and Aryabhata is the period is 476, 676 Common Era, or AD, what we used to be called in my childhood. So 150 years old, at least, about. And in that, he had made such an accurate computation of sine and or sines of various angles. This is interesting. So, reading Indian history of maths around that time, the focus here was getting answers and getting the numbers. The thing was not in understanding the thing and developing a theory as to why this is happening, etc., etc. So they didn't go after how sine is defined. They didn't go after how can we write a general formula for this approximation. They just wrote it down. That was the style. Okay. Anyway, since we are having 3 sessions instead of 2, I don't have to go in a hurry. I don't have to rush through the coursework in a hurry, and do let you have such tidbits of external things to our coursework. And history of Indian math and sine particularly, I've been really fascinated from the time I heard from Kim Plofker. Earlier I had heard, but I had not taken it seriously, because there are so many claims made. But after I heard from Kim Plofker, and then this Wikipedia, where it even cites the sources from where this has been taken, I was quite, I now accept that. Okay. Anyway, so coming back to what we did today, we tried to, from the power series way of defining sine and cosine, or we could deduce several properties. You can define those from algebra and then get to the from other tools, and then get to the power series way of writing it as well. But as I said, the more ways of doing the same thing that you know from very different ways, from very different approaches, it's useful, because you never know what you will find in an extension of this that you may be wanting to work at later. So time is up, and today perhaps you have a class on Tuesdays. So Those who want to go can go, but I have some 5-10 minutes at least to answer questions, if any.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So any question or any comment or anyone would like to share? Let me see if there is something about. Oh, so Sumit had asked, maybe he has left already, but regarding Jiva and how it is related to the arc of a bow. Okay, remind me next session when tomorrow when we start, you remind me, someone, those who are still around, and I can start by explaining what this is. Oh, okay. So I talked, yeah.
I don't know if it's the right place to talk, but just about a question I came across, recreational mathematics sort of. May I share?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, so we have a chessboard, right? So in a chessboard, we have, we want knights to cover the encross and, like, okay, I was taken. Perfect. So.
Just like board encross n, that's what you want to say?
Yeah. We have an encross n board. We need to find the least number of knights that can be kept so that they won't attack each other. The board is covered by their position union their attack position. I mean, like, the board is covered by their position union their attacking position. So, okay. And they won't attack each other. I want to find the least number of knights doing this. Okay.
Okay.
Even for the 5K configuration. Like,
I can't. We lost your voice.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, now you are audible. Yeah, you want to find the least possible thing for a given n, is it?
For an n-cross n matrix, I want to find the least possible number of knights so that they don't attack each other, but their attacking position union their current position spans over the chessboard. So,
okay.
This is similar to the k-knight problem or the n-queen problem, but there we don't have that condition about they would have to span the board. Like, if spanning comes, then they should.
Yeah, I mean, I've not come across this kind of issues, so problems. So I don't have anything to add, but if somebody has any idea.
Sir, maybe rather than exactly estimating it for like the n by n chessboard, like the number of knights which can do this, is there a way to like sort of approximate it and an approximation that gets closer for larger and larger n? Is there some kind of solution in that sense, or because like the number of configurations enumerating it, I don't really know how to do that either. So.
No, not the number of configuration. Like the least number of knights we can place with this configuration.
Sorry, I meant that. Sorry, the words got jumbled a little bit. Sorry.
So, not really clear how. So one approach could be to write a simulation code that you pick one location, then you pick one more from the things which are not yet covered or not yet attacked, and it relatively do it. That may not give you the best, but you do it a large number of times, and the smallest out of that will be approximately equal, close to the best.
Would like, sir, like rather than simulating it, is there a way to say, like, consider, like, let's say the space of possible ways the knight K knights can be placed across like on this chessboard, right? And then of that, like some subset of that entire
I'm
set of
sure there will be
configurations.
ways somebody else may have worked on it, but I don't
Okay.
know. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
But being a probabilist and this method often is very useful. It may
Yeah,
not-
like looking at the asymptotics. Right?
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.